let's think a little bit about what similarity actually means. I have here a photo of my brother and his wife and his two little kids. That's dizygotic twins. And if I'm at a family gathering, we start comparing them to their parents. And I used this photo already in a physical conference where I was able to ask the audience this question: what do you think? Who does Victor more look like? More like his father or more like his mother? And unfortunately, I can't see now who of you raises his or her hand for mother or father, but I can tell you what the usual answers are. They are quite split in half. There is no clear answer to this question. And that makes me wonder whether it's a proper question you can ask. Probably not. It's too general, right? We cannot tell whether this face looks like one parent or the other. But we could rephrase the question and go on the feature level. So if I asked, what do you think? Are the eyebrows more similar to the mother or the father? Then there's a clear tendency to the mother. So more people think that Victor has the eyebrows that have a similar shape like her mother, like his mother. And this is basically exactly how we work as clinicians, right? We even use features to coin the names of disorders, like with kabuki makeup syndrome, because the high-arced, laterally rarefied eyebrows are so characteristic for this syndrome. Again, if I wouldn't show the names of these syndromes in an audience and asked for the diagnosis, kabuki is a safe call for most of you. People who know me often also get the Mabry syndrome or HPMRS syndrome because I like to show it. I'm very interested in this disease, but it's a tougher question because it's less frequent. And the one on the right-hand side, well, you can now answer it because Karen already showed this patient, but it is so rare that most people don't even know the name that UMIM used to describe it. It's basically an acronym from characteristic features that these patients have: a cataract and a juvenile onset of arrhythmia and cardiomyopathy. So Karen already explained you how to use that new support in the desktop version. In the mobile version, it will probably also follow soon. And this is how it looked like until 21, right? You could get kabuki and Mabry on the top rank, and only now also LEMD2. So let's think a little bit why. So there is a minimum number of cases that you need to train an AI in a supervised manner. And so far we required 7 to 14, depends a little bit on the distinctiveness of the phenotype. But PIC-V or Mabry indicates pretty much the boundary what we were able to do so far. So what I'm displaying here is the number of submissions of pathogenic variants to ClinVar. And this is a good heuristic for estimating the incidence or prevalence in a relative manner. So kabuki is much more frequent, much more prevalent than Mabry, and that's much more prevalent than LEMD2. Okay, but if you look at the mere number of disorders and with respect to the frequency, most of them are ultra rare. So we can only support with the new tool the majority of disorders. because we couldn't train them so far in a supervised manner. Okay, now let's get back to our familiar case. And I walk you through a schematic neural network. So the neural network was trained with the known syndromes, Kabuki, Hutchinson-Gilford-Progeria syndrome, and several others, but not with this phenotype. So, oops. So what we basically do with that new phenotype, we compute the values until the penultimate layer in the network. That's also referred to as the feature layer. And this is the coordinate of this portrait in a high-dimensional space. We refer to it as the clinical face phenotype space. So distances in this space represent syndromic similarity or dissimilarity. So the closer you are, the more similar you are in a syndromic measure, right? And that's basically how we identify these two. So let's think a little bit more about how this looks like for the AI and for clinicians. So we asked dysmorphologists like Karen to rank or grade the distinctiveness of facial gestalt in a disorder. So if it's a visual diagnosis, you don't need any additional test, then you would assign a distinctiveness score of 3. If you only think it's a little bit supportive for establishing the diagnosis, you would only assign it a 1. So the higher the distinctiveness score, the more characteristic the pattern of the facial gestalt. And then we measured the top 10 accuracy of the AI, and this correlates. So we can basically conclude that AI will do well on the same subjects that dysmorphologists can match, right? And that's why we can use that technology for matching. And the important fact is that many of the disorders that haven't been linked to a gene have a high distinctiveness. They are out there somewhere, right? They are just so rare that you probably need to look through someone else's eyes. So there's not a single clinician anymore that will see 2 patients of that kind. And that's exactly why we can use this technology now. And the fact here in that figure is that the prevalence and the distinctiveness do not correlate. So we can also match the ultra rare ones. And how did we test it, or how effective will that be? Well, we just took the latest dysmorphic phenotypes that have been associated with a gene from GestaltMatcher, and we analyzed how many of them could have been linked with GestaltMatcher. So here I use, for example, TMEM94, and I will try to use a laser pointer to explain it a little bit more in detail. So this is a pairwise rank matrix. That means we are comparing the distances in the clinical face phenotype space of all the portraits that are living there. And then we simply list the closeness of these individuals for which I do the analysis. And the first integer after the F is indicating the family. So this is no surprise. And the second one would be a family member. So these two here are members of the same family. And not surprisingly, they are next neighbors to each other, right? The diagonal always needs to be 0 because that's a self-comparison. But let's see who is the second hit. Well, this is an individual with the same disorder, but from a different family, right? And they're also on rank 5. There's another one with the same molecular diagnosis. And this is the statistic for all the cases that we tested. So we would assume that roughly a third of the novel disorders can be matched by GestaltMatcher. Okay, and yeah, some more phenotypes have already been solved by that technology or delineated. The phenotype has been described. There's an app that you can use for these pairwise comparisons. And I would be happy if you contact me or Nicole to get more details about how to use this research app for delineating new phenotypes.